Uh, Nice meeting you. I just learned the Ako ay Filipino. What does this mean? I'm very sorry not to be able to speak in any Filipino languages, but it's a bit unfortunate, as a speaker of Korean, which is my major language, but we have to communicate in English. So we are a bit unfortunate, but let's bear in mind that we are using the second language as a medium of communication this time. Um, okay, so today let me introduce what is translanguaging and translanguage education and some experience from the Chiang Mai, Thailand, and then some typology of different conditions for different strategies at the end. And then I receive some question and answer. Okay, so let me begin. Can you hear me properly, Chad? Are you
Yes,
okay?
sir. We can hear you.
Okay. So, okay, so the title for the presentation is Spinning the Top. Okay, Translanguaging Education for Multilingual Students in multilingual classrooms. So if you understand the concept of spinning top today, then you can understand about 90% of my presentation today. So let's tune and then try to understand what does this spinning top in a metaphor means. Okay, so before I get into the detail, I want you to draw attention to this metaphor of translanguaging tree. Okay, so many people ask me, what did it look like in the classroom? What is the translanguaging education look like in the classroom? What kind of activity you do? But what is more important than the activity is invisible part. Whereas visible part is something to do with activity, the strategies, and etc. materials. But what is more important is the invisible part, which is the root part of the tree, which is more something to do with the theories and principles and the philosophies and approach. So unless we have the strong foundation in our root, and in terms of this philosophy and principle, is the visible part, the leaves and fruit will be dry up. So let me spend some time to talk about the philosophy, the approach, the theory of translanguaging before we get into some strategies and activities, okay? Okay, so are you all multilingual? I noticed that you start talking in Tagalog or Filipino and then you switch to English back and forth. I guess you are in English. Thank you, Chat, for the thumbs up so that I can I can see your response. Okay, and then how have we been becoming multilingual? Okay, so you can think about how you became multilingual. There are different ways to become multilingual. Okay, some people become multilingual by learning the second language at school, so through the formal education. So when they enter the school, when they may learn learn subject using their home language as a medium of instruction, but by the time they reach a higher level of grades, they may learn second language. And when they reach the third secondary or high school, they learn third language, something like that. And then the other people, they may become multilingual through the informal socialization, by the social contact, by dialogue within their community or wider community. They are exposed to different languages besides their home language. So even if they are not educated, even if they didn't learn the language in the school, they are becoming multilinguals. How are these two ways of becoming multilinguals different, you think? Okay, so you may think about, so it is very important to think whether people's the home language, the L1, is dominant language in their wider community or their society and country, or non-dominant language in their society. So there is a big difference between whether their home language is dominant language or non-dominant language. How do you think these are different? Just think about it. And then how do our students become multilingual? And what's their home language? So think of whether their home language is dominant language in the society or non-dominant language in the Philippines. Okay, thanks. So let me introduce the two different kinds of extreme case of becoming multilingual. Okay, so this is the kind of continuum. So there are people who are multilingual between this continuum, between these two ends. Okay, so these are two extreme cases, but people may occur along this continuum between these two cases. First one is sequential multilingualism, and so they may become multilingual by learning the language, second language in the school. So those who are educated, they become more multilingual. So this is also called elite multilingualism. The reason this is called sequential is because first they learn, they improve, they develop their L1 like that. But after a certain time, they learn second language after they learn the first language in the school or wherever. And then at a certain time later, they learn third language. So this becomes sequential. They are becoming multilingual sequentially. And then mostly the people who are becoming multilingual like this is through the formal education. That's why this is also called elite multilingualism. You may simply think this is kind of a Mickey Mouse kind of metaphor, Mickey Mouse shape. So those people whose home language is English. Hello, okay. So those people whose home language is English, like Americans, they are more like this kind of following this kind of model. So think about this model. And then for this case, since their home language is very dominant in not only their home country, America or Australia, England, but also all over the world. So their English, the L1, their home language is sufficient, to survive, to communicate, to live their lives. So there are not much chance to need second or third language in their language repertoire when they communicate. So L1 is very dominant, still dominant and very sufficient. The second type is that they are simultaneous or grassroots multilingualism. So the children become multilingual as soon as they are born, okay? So as soon as while at home, they may use one language at L1, but as soon as they come out of their home domain, they are exposed to the second, third language. Even within the home domain, they are listening, they are watching television, in which is, for which they can hear the national language, which is their second or third. So they are becoming multilingual from the grassroots, okay, from the birth, and then they are becoming multilingual simultaneously, not sequentially, but from the beginning, they are exposed to different languages. So simultaneous multilingualism or grassroots multilingual. And then this multilingual kind of ability becomes expanded as time goes. So they are developing this way. And I would call this, and then externally you can see sometimes they use, the reason there is a much overlap here between L1 and L2, L3 is because their L1 is not sufficient to communicate, to survive, to live in their wider community, because their L1 is not dominant language in this case. They are non-dominant language. So sometimes they use L1 only, but many times they use L1, L2, L3 together so that they can fully show their true knowledge. So this is perspective from the external point of view. So we can hear sometimes they use only one language, but many times they use two languages together. But if you look at their multilingual competence from the internal perspective, from their brain, actually there is only one linguistic repertoire. There is one language competence, unitary, linguistic competence, so which is called translanguaging. Okay, so between these two models, most multilingual occur falls between these two models. So think about what kind of model, what kind of multilingualism you have, and think about how our children in the village, how they are becoming multilingual. Okay. Now let me talk about the bilingual dynamic multilingualism. So you may already know that the subtractive bilingualism is that most non-dominant language students, they when they enter the school, but their language died, and then only when they graduate the school, only the school language survived. And the additive bilingualism, when it is most the case for the dominant language students. So when they enter school and then they learn the second school language, and they speak home language, school language separately, but those two languages exist together. The last one that I want to put emphasis on is dynamic bilingualism, okay? So home language and school language together becomes the translanguaging. There's no separate boundary between home language and school language, but only one whole linguistic competence is there. So dynamic, the reason I put the different 7 colors of rainbow for the dynamic term is because, not because these languages are divided by different colors, but this is kind of one color. Okay, so the color of rainbow is actually color rainbow, not the 7 different colors. Okay, so we try to look at the bilingual student from one kind of mixture of the whole different colors. Okay, so they have one competence, but they use different language features from each language for certain purposes, for specific reasons. But they have one unitary repertoire. Okay, so this may be another metaphor to demonstrate, to represent how the bilingual religion works. So bilingual students. Bilinguals are like the drummer with 2 hands, 2 sticks. Okay. So bilinguals are not like a drummer with 1 hand. Drummer should have 2 hands. They should be able to use 2 hands together for communication. Okay. So it is not fair if we doesn't allow them to use only 1 hand. When they are allowed to use 2 hands together, then they can truly show their true performance. Okay, as you notice that the drum player here, sometimes she used the 2 sticks for the same size, and sometimes for different size. Sometimes she used one hand, 1 stick, but sometimes she used 2 sticks together. Sometimes using 2 sticks together for different size, but sometimes she used 2 sticks for the same size. So the same is true for the bilingual. They can use sometimes 1 language for certain purpose, but many times they use 2 languages together, for the same domain, even for the same sentence, they use 2 languages together. So this is kind of truly show their who our bilingual students are. Okay, so this is another metaphor, like bilinguals are like one hurdler with two skills. One is running and the jumping. Okay, so if we truly appreciate the skill, the performance of the hurdler, then we have to think the running skill and jumping skill together. We should not separate their running and jumping skill. Okay, so if we compare the skill, the performance of hurdler with only running skill with the one runner, this is not fair. The runner, must win the game, because the hurdler cannot spend all their time, effort only for learning only, because they are hurdlers, so they have to practice not only running, but also jumping. So we have to look at our students who are bilingual from having the 2 language skills together. Okay, so let our bilingual students be themselves, who they are, rather than try to look at them from the separate language perspective. Okay, so you may know the threshold theory. Let me just briefly summarize this one. So if we the first ground is limited bilingual. So neither home language nor school language is below the monolingual student who speak the same language. Okay, so in this case, there is negative cognitive effect. The second floor, only 1 language out of 2 is the same as the monolingual student who speak the same language. So in this case, there's neither positive nor negative cognitive effect. If the top floor, if the both languages are balanced, developed, and as good as the monolingual student who speak the same language, then there's a positive cognitive effect. So by the end of the students who graduate the MTB-MLE program, maybe grade 3 or grade 4 or grade 2, depending on different countries. So by the time they exit, they try to reach this kind of balanced level, like top floor. But after that program, most schools, they exit, they drop their L1 component, and then the school, they usually join the mainstream curriculum, mainstream schools. Then there is no further support for their home language. So from that time on, until they graduate the high school, they become like a second floor situation. So there's neither positive nor negative. Okay, so we need to continue to develop their L1. So the translanguaging education help these students to continue to develop their L1 and L2 together until they graduate. Okay, so this is a quote from one Hispanic student from South America who studied in America. And she said, "Even though Spanish runs through my heart, English rules my veins." Okay, this is what she said exactly. So then, as an educator, how, if the bilingual learners' language practices flow through their veins and heart, how can we as an educator help them without blocking their circulatory flow? This is our mission. Okay, so let's. This is the metaphor about mirror and window. So if we really want our student to develop, to perform well, to really learn the new knowledge beyond the open window, then we truly should reflect their true language practice, their true who they are with the clear mirror. Then only they can see something new. They can learn new knowledge. They can develop through the open window. Okay, if our mirrors, our curriculum, our practice, education practice is not really reflecting their true bilingual identity, their true bilingual practice, then our window can be closed like this with the curtain on, and they cannot see, they cannot learn new things. So this kind of metaphor. Okay, now, so do you have any questions so far about the bilingualism? Shall I keep on going?
Yes, sir. We'll ask questions later.
Okay, so now let me talk about the translanguaging education, why and what. Okay, why are we talking about translanguaging education? It's because we have two reasons. First of all, in many cases, we have multilingual classrooms. In one classroom, there are students who are coming from different linguistic backgrounds. They are studying together. So this is Friday class photo of grade 1 in Chiang Mai, in Thailand. Here, you can see the different students who are wearing different costume of their own ethnic groups. So how many how many language background can you recognize here? What's that? So there are 4 to 5 languages that coexist in the same classroom in grade 1. So because of this multilingual classroom, we need a translanguage education. Second, students themselves are becoming bilingual and multilingual, okay? So because of two reasons, I believe translanguage education is very important. Now, then what is translanguaging? So this is the definition from the Ophelia Garcia and her husband, Ortegi and Reid. So let me read it. The deployment of a speaker's full linguistic repertoire without regard for watchful adherence to the socially and politically defined boundaries of named languages. So it took some time, for me to truly grasp understand this definition, but this is very challenging for the teachers, for the local teachers who are implementing this translanguaging. So I made it very simplified. like this way. Okay, so translanguaging is using all the languages which is resource, like all the languages that a speaker knows, how freely first of all, freely across the language boundaries and properly according to the context of communication. What's the goal? In order to make maximum meaning. Okay, so using all of their language resources freely across the boundaries, but not only freely, not only always mixing, but properly according to the context of communication, properly, appropriately. Well, how? Why? In order to make maximum meaning. So this is the definition, my definition of translanguaging. So this is easier than the Garcia's. And then the local teacher understood this one. And then there are three concepts of trans in translanguaging. First, trans means transcending. They transcend the language boundaries. And second, trans means transdisciplinary. So it transcends the language subject and transcend academic subject, other in the content subject. So, and then it transcends between language subject and content subject. Okay, and the third, trans means transformative. So by translanguaging, they transform who they are, transform their subjectivity. So they are not like, not anymore, they are backward, backward slow learners, because they are so rural, they are on the mountains. So they are regarded like they are very slow learner. They don't understand national language. So they are always performing very low. But, with this translanguaging, perspective, they can change who they are. They can perform better. They can become critical, they can become creative. So they can change their concept, their identity of who they are. To tell the truth, as a colleague in an international organization for the last more than 20 years, I have been so much afraid whenever I use English before native speakers, before Americans or English. Because my English is not always good enough to understand. So the idea, the paradigm of translanguaging, I became very proud of who I am. So I'm not afraid anymore. So I'm very proud of my English before the native speaker. So I am much less afraid before the presenting before the Americans anymore. Okay, so this kind of changing subjectivity in the translanguaging will enhance this changing of subjectivity. The second part in translanguaging, the languaging means, as you can see, language, and there are INGs there. Okay, so this means in the languaging, translanguaging is a verb. We are not speaking one language, but we are languaging. Okay, so this is a verb, not a noun. And again, this is performance and practice, not a product. Okay, and then it's the ongoing process. It is not end product. Okay, so trans is transcending and languaging is performance, always in the practice in the verb. And then what is translanguage education? Translanguage education is to learn academic contents expressed in school and home languages by leveraging learner translanguaging. So translanguaging education is to learn the academic content which is contained, so which is combined, which is integrated in school language and home languages. Okay, so content itself cannot be taught, cannot be learned without any language. Okay, so content should be integrated with the languages, both school language and home language. How? By leveraging, by utilizing student translanguaging practice as a resource. Okay, this is translanguage education. How translanguaging came about? So this was initially developed by the Welsh scholar called Ken Williams. He's Welsh scholar, Welsh and English bilingual. So the term he used in Welsh language is "traviestu." Okay, so at this time he used this term in his pedagogy of teaching the second language, teaching. At this time the concept of translanguaging by him is he used he used one language, like Welsh for input and English for output. And the other day he used the English for input and the Welsh for the output. So when student listen, he used listen input. So he used English, but when student speak, he used Welsh for output. And when read, English and write in Welsh, something like that. So the other day they switch around the role of the languages. So this was originally used as a pedagogical strategy for two languages, but this was translated later on by his Ph.D. supervisor, the Colin Baker. The Colin Baker is also the supervisor of the Catherine Young, the one who worked in the Philippines before. So he used the translated this as translinguifying before, and then Colin Baker connected Ken Williams and Ophelia Garcia later in 2000 in Welsh, and eventually Ophelia Garcia and others they made the term like translanguaging, and debate further developed. So I presented some example from Chiang Mai in Praha and 2 years ago in Czech Republic, and I got some idea from her for them. Okay, now let's talk about translanguaging top model. Am I speaking too fast, or do you understand my English?
Yes.
Yes, Doc.
Yes,
I'm
sir.
sorry for my accent.
We are used to K-drama.
Okay.
Yeah, we watch a lot.
Are you like the drama was okay, na? Okay. Okay, so let's look at these two states of top. Okay, what do you think between these two states? One is static top, the other one is spinning top. On this static top, you can see some different languages like Korean, German, Thai, English, Hindi and Greek. Okay, so these are my languages, the one that I use, that I have. Okay, and the spinning top is spinning. I spin this top. Okay, so what do you think for these two? You can see in this on this static tab, you can see how many languages I speak, and you can see also the boundaries of different languages, right? But on the spinning tab, you cannot see the boundary, but you can see the mixture of different colors of languages, right? So which one do you prefer? Okay, so there are two different views about the language. One is the static type perspective. Okay, they look at the language as a fixed structure. Okay, should be always clear boundaries. So they cannot, cross the boundaries of languages. So language should be always pure. They cannot mix, they cannot borrow words from other languages. And then language should be noun. Okay, so it's fixed product. The other one is spinning type perspective. Language performance, practice, there is a fuzzy boundary, the porous boundaries. So they're always continuum between languages, and language actually flows, okay? And the languaging, so the verb, not the noun. So static type perspective represent this kind of traditional perspective of language, and spinning type is more like a postmodern, or like the true language competence of bilingual students. And then there are different practices according to these two different stages of top. Okay, static top practice allow only one language to be used at a time in school. Okay, so in this case, our bilingual student whose home language is a non-dominant language, and who are learning the subject using dominant language in school, our bilingual student can use only small part of their language resources. If we don't allow them to use all of their language resources, if we allow them to use only school language, then the static down, then they can use only small part, which is something to do with the school language. Okay, they have to suppress the most of their language resources, which is something to do with their home language. They have to suppress, they have to bury. They cannot use their significant part of their language resources for learning, okay? But monolingual students, okay, they can use, monolingual students whose home language is dominant language, the same as the school language, they can use most of their language resources, okay? So this is not really a kind of just education. On the other hand, the spinning type practice, this allow all of their language resources together at a time. Okay, so both in this case, both the monolingual students and bilingual students can use most of their language resources. So at the moment, besides the MTB-MLE, most schools in the world, they use static type practice only. They use only one language to be used, mostly school language to be used in the school. So most bilingual students perform very lower than the monolingual students. So this is not good. So by translanguaging pedagogy, promote the balancing between two stages of this type, okay? So if we allow only static type perspective, static type practice, like only school language should be used in school, then the education playing field is sloped, okay? Because the bilingual student cannot show their true knowledge using only school language, which is very small part of their language resources, whereas monolingual student can use most of their language resources, so they can always perform better than bilingual students. So this is sloped. This is unfair, okay? So maybe you can imagine that the bilingual student is the education, the learning for bilingual student is like a climbing up this slope playing field, whereas the monolingual student is like sliding down from the top. That much easier. So this is unfair. In order to make this education playing field fair, we need another triangle. We need to spin. We need to spin the top. We need to allow the bilingual student to use all of their language resources so that they can truly show their true knowledge using all of their language resources, both their home language and school languages. Then only this education playing field is level. Then only both monolingual and bilingual students can perform in an equal base. Okay, this is very important concept you must understand to further understand. And there are two different versions of translanguaging type, okay? First one is the fast spinning version, and second one is in a slow spinning version. Fast spinning version, as you can see, as you don't see, you cannot see the boundaries. So this is using all of their language resources freely and freely. So they can use all of their languages together freely. This is fast spinning. The slow spinning, you can see some boundaries. You can see the name of the languages, the different colors, right? So the boundaries are a bit soft. So sometimes they borrow words from another language. Sometimes they put the two languages together and they compare the differences and similarities. So we need both of these, okay? But we need to have a strong version first, and then via slow version and then static version. So translanguaging pedagogy is balancing from the fast version via slow version and static version. So we need all of this. But at the moment, the present school, they have only static version. So most bilingual students cannot really show their knowledge using only school language. So I guess most of you know the genre of fractional development. The student learn something, something in their genre of fractional development, okay? So with the help of the friends or teacher who are better able to, who have more knowledge, then they can learn better. But for the bilingual students, they need bilingual genre of fractional development. So bilingual students learn the new knowledge and skill when they can use their two languages. Because they are bilingual, they have to be allowed to use their two languages, okay, in interaction with others who know better than them. Okay, so for the bilingual students, for our students whose home language is non-dominant, they need a bilingual genre of fractional development. So we had some activity during the workshop, several times the workshop, that the first time we asked the teacher participant to use only English, which is their limited language, okay? Like a school language for the students. The English is school language for the teacher, okay? So we allow them to use only English, but without consulting any dictionaries, but working alone. So they were supposed to describe the village picture, but using only English alone. And the second time, we allow them to use to be able to use Google Translate or Google search to find out the meaning of the word. So it's spinning up. And then first one is static type, using only English. And second one is spinning type alone. And then the third time, we allow them to work together by using only only English only, okay, without using their comfortable language. And then lastly, we allow them to use all of their language resources to describe, to finish their description. So at the end of that, so this one, the blue color, the writing is when they are working together using only English, okay? So which is represented by the static tab, together. So they use only one language, but working together. And so they wrote only 4 sentences, but when they are allowed to use all of their language resources bilingually, and together with other participants, they wrote, how many more? 9 more sentences besides the 4 sentences. So they themselves experience that when they are working alone, they perform the lowest. When they are working together using all of their language resources, they could perform best. Okay, so this is so they perform in this descending order. When the language of static type, okay, so the single language in the school, when the language of static type is the weaker language of the students, like the English for the teacher, and then the national language, the Thai or the Tagalog for in a southern region of the Philippines, if the Tagalog is not their strong language, then when they, so the weaker language of the student, which is like a Tagalog or English for student from the Mindanao, okay, the performance level of each condition is likely in this descending order. Okay, so they perform the best when they are working together using all of their language resources. They perform so in this descending order, okay, they perform the lowest when they are working alone using only Tagalog, if their home language is not the Tagalog. Okay. So this is how much do you agree? How much do you get this idea? Okay, so let me hear the question if you have any clarifying question at the end of this presentation. Okay, so it is very important to balance. So translanguaging in a strategy is balancing from static type alone, this static type alone, via static type together, working together, okay, using only one language with others, and then spinning type alone and spinning type together. So spinning type together, this represents the bilingual zone of fractional development. So presently, the strategies of spinning type alone, this one, using all of their language resources, but working alone, and together are missing in most schools. Okay. So then we have to add, we does not mean, I don't mean that we don't need a static type. I don't mean we need only one language, but we need to add this spinning type aspect, spinning type practice on top of the static type practice, so that they can have balance. Okay, so that bilingual student can have a chance to show their true knowledge, can have a chance to learn the new concept using all of their language resources. Okay, so if we look at this chart graph again, then at present we have only a static type practice, so which is slope playing field, but we need to add a spinning type practice so that they can have a true level playing field. Okay, so this is translanguaging performance formula. So this is a present performance level. So okay. So the teacher's role is, by teacher's help, we want to make the spinning top with peers the same as the spinning top alone. Okay, by teacher's help, we want to make this performance the same. So ultimately, we by utilizing spinning top alone or spinning top together, ultimately we want our student to perform using only one language as good as when they are allowed to use all of their language resources, so that they can pass the exam, using only one language. Okay, but we have to start from, we have to utilize the spinning top practice. You may wonder then what is the classroom look like of the translanguage education? Okay, so there are two players in the classroom, students and teachers. So as for the students, we have to consider two different concepts. One, first one is translanguaging current, second is translanguaging performance. Okay, so the current, how do you see the difference between the two different kinds of the flow, the current? So the first one, the upper one is the flow, the current of the stream is controlled by the strong concrete, the hard, one shape, concrete, right? So you can see the divergence, the different kind of, change of the flow from the upper picture. But the second picture, this is more natural. So so they can decide that the stream, the current can decide whether they want to flow in one stream or whether they want to divide into two streams. Okay, depending upon the topology of the region. So this is current. This is the translanguaging current, the second one. Okay, and the upper one is the monolingual one language only, imposed by the policy. Okay. So when we teach in the classroom, teacher needs to be always sensitive. What kind of current that do the student have? Do they want to use their home language together with their school language? Then we need to give them the freedom for a certain time to utilize their home language to flow according to their natural flow, natural current, so that they can truly show their knowledge. They can learn better. So this is the metaphor for that. And then the translanguaging performance is two dimensions. As I said, there's spinning the performance and static the performance. Spinning the performance means using bilingual speakers entire language resources to show their knowledge, such as to explain, persuade, argue, compare, contrast, evaluate, etc. Static type performance is using only one language, okay, at a time to show the same. Okay, so so I made a translanguaging performance talk to truly understand where they are in terms of their language proficiency in different languages of students. Okay, so these are the performance. The circle represents their performance level. The first one is entering and then emerging. The performance is developing and expanding and commanding. Okay, and the line divides language boundaries. Okay, and then the angle of the circle represents the amount of language use. Okay, so this one, they use one language for this amount, and this amount for the second language, and this amount for the third language. And then this arrow represents the progression of the performance of each language. And then at the same time, the arrow divides their oracy and then the literacy, the amount of oracy and the amount of literacy, okay? So the green color represents home language, and blue, maybe Tagalog, and red English. This is one example anyway. And then about the performance level, the horizontal line represents the oracy, listening and speaking, and vertical line represent their reading and writing. They write down, okay, so vertical, and they talk with each other horizontally. So the oracy represented by horizontal lines, and literacy represented by the vertical line. So this is the sample, one sample of the grade 4, maybe grade 3 of some schools in the Philippines, okay? So their home language oracy is almost in the expanding level, but their literacy is like a developing level. And their Tagalog oracy is this developing level, and oracy in literacy in Tagalog is emerging level. And their English reading and writing entering level, and reading and writing is more than that. So this is, so teacher can draw this translanguage performance top of each student, or tough for certain group of students within their class, so that teacher can make use of this idea for their lesson and unit plan. Okay, so this is static type performance. So this is static, this is stop. So you can see how they perform in each language, okay? Static type performance. When we look at their spinning type, then their spinning type oracy performance and literacy performance is a bit higher than their home language performance, because you know their home language is not still good enough, not good enough. They sometimes they need some words, you know, need to be borrowed from their second or third languages. So if they borrow those words and then write it down or speak, then their speech or writing is more rich than using only one language, even if they is on their home language. So their spinning performance is higher, better than their home language performance. Okay, so you may be familiar with the two balloon metaphor and iceberg in the common underlying proficiency, but what I promote is the translanguaging top performance. Okay, so I think Jim Cummins, he missed out the overlapping part here above the surface level. He didn't indicate that when they translanguage, when they use two languages together. So I put that here. Okay, so sometimes they use one language, sometimes they use the other language, and sometimes they use two languages together above the surface. But whether they speak either one language or the other language, even if, this is what Garcia said, a bilingual learners always leverage all of their language resources to make a sense, even when they use one language at the surface level. Because there is only one place for the language in our brain, whether they are monolingual or bilinguals, okay? So even if they speak one language, even if they write in one language, their brain, okay, they're under the surface level, there are two languages, all of their language resources are working together, okay, spinning. Okay, so I think the translanguaging top model, top performance, you know, this one is more realistic for our bilingual students. Okay, so Felix Garcia also used the metaphor of three strands for teachers' translanguage pedagogy. So the three strands, the first one is stance, the second is design, the lesson unit design, and then shift. Okay, so first one, stance. Okay, so different stance. So they ignore stance of ignorance. So they ignore the home language resources. They ignore the identity of bilingual students. And the stance of simplification, since they don't know the school language very well, so they water down the standard. So they learn in a small, lower amount of lower standard than the monolingual student. Stance of amplification, this is that we want to promote, is by using looking at bilingualism and home language as a resource rather than problem. When they mix two languages, they may look at it in mistake. This is error, but we don't look at this one by this kind of conversation as an error, but this is a resource to learn. Okay, and we try to position their language in their lips and mind of their student, at them, not by the external standard or regulation. Okay, we respect their language performance. Okay, so we start from their actual language practice, and then ultimately we try to drag them to the external standard. But we first of all position the language in their lips and mind, and the translanguaging transforms subjectivity, as I said earlier, and then continue of the stance of amplification. Bilingual students, different languages actually work together rather than separately, because it's one chunk, one competence. The classroom space must promote collaboration across different content subject, language subject, and between teacher and student and the parents, and between home and schools. And classroom is a democratic space where teacher and student work together. They co-create knowledge. It's democratic space. Let me show you one example from here. So here they work. So the teacher gave gave the activity for the student to find out the different kinds of cooking in their community. So she gave the Thai, the school language, Thai term for different kinds of cooking. And the students were encouraged to find out the same term or same ways in their home language. And then the student presented here and the teacher wrote down their idea here. Okay. And then after they finished their presentation, teacher reviewed here. So this is the Thai, and this is their like current. Okay, so here, I don't know how you feel, but the teacher is asked, you know, so some group, most group, they came up with this this set of the terms for the different kind of cooking, but some group, they came up with different terms for the same meaning. So a teacher is asking, why you came up with this term? And then the student answer, and the teacher learned from the student. So this way, and I see they co-create the knowledge. The teacher became not only teacher, teaching position, but also learner position. So teacher became co-learner along with the student, so that, you know, this is more democratic kind of classroom. They are co-creating the knowledge. So this is kind of example of the stance of amplification. Okay, the design. So for design, you know, the translanguage unit plan and the strategy, the two components. And this is the translanguage unit plan template. And so we don't, in translanguage education, we don't have our separate curriculum. Whereas MTB-MLE, you know, they develop their own curriculum. But for the translanguage education, we don't have separate curriculum, but we use the government standard as same, but we add the translanguaging component into the existing curriculum, okay? So the content objective come from the government standard, but we add language objective in 4 skills in school language, home language, and English with static and spinning the performance. Okay, so in each language, in how much they can speak, listen, speak, read, and write in each language. And then in this objective, we also set the spinning type performance objective, so that when they combine when they use 2 languages together, how much they can learn, okay? So those things are also set as an objective. And the culminating project. So this is, through this project, students will have to show what they have learned throughout the whole unit. Okay, so this is planned from the beginning of the unit, and according to this, they plan their lessons under the unit plan. And then connect question, so this connect their existing knowledge in their home language and culture to the learning, to the content they learn in the school. And the translating strategies consist of 4 states of, you know, spinning types, like a static type alone, static type together, spinning type alone, spinning type together. And then translanguage resource and materials. Actually, this, okay, so the teachers, they learn how to make this translanguage unit plan during the 2nd translanguage workshop last month. And now they are making this unit plan for their semester. But all these new ideas about translanguaging, you know, should reflect their translanguage performance type. So from where they are, where the students are, based on that, the teacher set the goals and, you know, plan the culminating project and, you know, strategy, etc. Okay, the strategy. Okay, so as I said, these translanguage strategies actually occurs along these 4 stages of tops. Okay, so first, teacher needs to think whether each student can perform when they are allowed to use only 1 language, stated alone. If not, then think about different activities of spinning alone spin it out alone, state it up together, and spin it up together. So they may start, because teachers usually don't speak student different home languages in this multilingual classroom. So teachers start from the school language, one language, okay? But if they cannot understand or not really grasp all the students, then think about different kinds of activities, strategies where students can utilize all of their language resources, helping each other. And then they should come back to each language so that they can show their knowledge in each language, through the working together using all of their languages. Okay. And then now let me show you some examples from the class, from the teachers who joined this project and then implementing this project. So they had a group work, pair work. I heard that the schools from the Mindanao, they group the students according to the common home language, right? And group work. So during this group work, so this is group. They group the student according to their same home language. So then they, in this small group or pair work, they can use their home language together with the school language freely. So this become spinning up together, and then they came up with one Thai language product. Okay, spinning that together, and they came up with English. And then this one, let me show. This is a very important video. So this one is the kind of story writing activities using the pictures, chronological pictures. So they wrote in Thai, and then they wrote in English also, and eventually they wrote in their home language, which is Hmong. So this is multilingual classrooms, and then this group is the Hmong student group, and then so they have never learned how to write their language, the Hmong language, and then this time they were encouraged to use the Thai script, Thai orthography to write their language. Okay, so initially they discussed how to write a certain sound using the Thai script. So they discussed so they came out with a common idea, and then initially they spent some time, maybe 1 minute, 2 minutes to discuss the difference, phoneme kind of, phonological kind of system between Thai and Hmong language. But once they agreed upon a certain level, they were very much straightforward to write the story in their home language. So this is the case when the students can never have never learned how to write in their home language, but they join the school, the mainstream language speaking schools, and then they learn how to read and write in their school language, which is not their home language. And then, we can start practicing their writing in their home language using transliterating kind of strategies. Okay, so this one is another activities. Okay, so this is grade 7. The earlier one was grade 3. This is grade 7. And this boy was considered like always making problem and slow learners, and then the girls were very fast learner, very smart. Okay, but when they had a chance to use all of their language resources and then compare between their home language like Lahu and then Thai and English, when they are talking about their home language, this student became very active and proactive, very, very much in participating and contributing to the discussion. So, in this small group, each student, different students have different performance level in different languages. So girl student, they better at Thai, but this boy student better in their home language. But when they are allowed to use only Thai, normally this boy student was not really showing his knowledge because he was not allowed to use his home language. But when they are working together using all of their language resources, including home language, then he became very active. so they learn from each other within their bilingual journal of proximal development. Okay, so so spinning top together. So they work, all the classroom, or whole class, work together to find out the terms, the words, which is corresponding to English, and then they read. And this one is also interesting kind of video. So teacher explained in Thai. I stop here. So this is when they had a group work, or sitting together with other students coming from the same language groups. When teacher taught a very difficult concept in mathematics, and like addition and subtraction with a number which is more than 100,000, something like that. And the question was very difficult. So only one student within this group understood, okay? So teacher using Thai was not able to explain clearly to the other student who didn't understood, okay? So teacher asked using Thai, asked this student to explain what she understood to other students who didn't got the idea. So she explained using oral language resources. So even if some student bothered her, distracted her, but she just focused on explaining. So this is one example. So student, within their group, some student, the student among themselves, they can help each other using their oral language resources, while teacher cannot do that. So this is spinning top, slow spinning top, because they can compare, their English, Thai, and Karen, different languages. Okay, this is a multilingual glossary, so they can compare. And then this one, when teacher asked writing the Thai, different kinds of cooking, one student, even without she was asked to do, but she wrote down some ideas in her home language first, and then she finally produced a Thai product to the teacher. So pre-write in home language and write in Thai, and then present. So because of time limit, I try to skip some part. So when teacher explained in Thai, static top, but student responded as a school class using the oral language resources together. And then after the teacher written down, and they were comparing the terms. So this is the kind of different categories of animals. So this is, fish and amphibian and mammal, something like that. So they compare two languages. So red part is their home language, and this one, green is Thai. Okay. This is about the writing. So after they learn different kinds of materials, like hard material, electric material, or soft material, different kinds of material, and then they were asked to write what they have learned within their lesson, and then this student wrote the summary in home language first, and then she wrote the English and the Thai later, based on their home language summary. And on the other hand, this student wrote the summary in school language first, the Thai, and then she wrote the same in home language. So this is grade 4 students. They are graduate from the MTB-MLE. So by the grade 3 from KG, they have learned the content in MTB-MLE, and this is grade 4, the mainstream class. And then, so at this time, I found that the students in writing performance in between home language and school language almost similar. So some student home language in writing is more comfortable, and some student home language, school language writing is more comfortable than the home language. So depending on, but they were encouraged to the summary in 2 languages together. Okay, so this one is mathematics. So the teacher taught like a addition of the different time units. This is 1 year has the 12 months. So this is kind of teacher made the problem with in terms of this unit of year and month, and the teacher asked one student to make another problem about 1 hour, about hour and the minute. So 1 hour equals to the 60 minutes. Okay, so student wrote made a problem in the home language, and then teacher is asking student what this means in Thai. Okay, and then they did that. They made another problem in their home language and then Thai as a group work, and then shift. The last one is shift. The shifting. So shifting is in the unplanned. Okay, they plan. They prepare their unit plan. They prepare their lesson plan. But this is unplanned, moment by moment decisions, depending on the students' translanguaging current. So even if this time teacher planned to use only Thai, but if student try to use their home language to express the concept, then teacher needs to shift their position, their plan to responding the student's current. Okay, so sometimes they have to use the dictionaries, or sometimes they need to talk one another to clarify, and sometimes look. Okay, so this is a moment by moment decision. So they prepare the lesson unit plan before the class, and then in the classroom, teachers shift their kind of plan according to the need of the students. Okay, teacher, about the assessment. So there are 2 principles of tier assessment. First one, we need to assess their performance according to the 4 different stages of their performance. Okay, tier top. So assess both spinning top and static top performance when they are working alone and together, because their performance level in each state is different. So teacher needs to assess their performance differently. And then in their language objective, in their unit plan, they have spinning top performance objective also. So when they assess, they have to check whether they achieve that objective or not in their evaluation. So they need to assess. But second question, then how can teacher assess the spinning top performance, even if when the teachers don't understand students' home language repertoire, right? Then we need to answer would be we need to consider different angles. Okay, so we need to make use of the people who understand their home language, like the students themselves, their peers, their families. Okay, so we need to have 5 different kinds of angles to assess their performance. First, the teacher themselves assess, but teacher also needs to ask the student to assess themselves, and then teacher also gets some feedback from the peers or group within the small group, and then teacher also gets some idea from the parents, and then teacher add up 4 different angles and then make average. Then teacher have a integrative class assessment. So teacher cannot usually use all of these angles, but depending on the situation, realistically he can choose some angles from time to time according to the need. Okay, so this is summary of the translanguage pedagogy. Stance, okay, translanguaging stance becomes the teacher's stance about bilingualism and home language becomes real in their unit design, okay? And this design is prepared according to the translanguaging top performance. Do you remember the top performance top, okay? And then the design in class shifts according to the translanguaging current. And these 3 strands, stance, design, and shift, help the student learn content, which is expressed in literature and languages by utilizing translanguaging strategies. So if this is too difficult, then I made a chart like this. The students have a translanguaging performance top and a translanguaging current, okay? So teacher design their lesson unit utilize based on this translanguaging performance top, but their design need to shift in the classroom according to the translanguaging current. and ultimately they want to achieve, they want the student to learn the content, which is in English literature and language, by utilizing 4 different kinds of translanguaging strategies. Why do I put the stance here with blue color? Is because the stance of teachers, stance of amplification of the teachers is the most important, crucial in order to implement this idea. That's why I put the color of stance in this rectangular chart. So the stance needs to be permeated all of her activity, all of teachers' activity, preparation, teaching, and evaluation, everything. If teachers don't agree this idea, this approach, then a teacher will not implement it. So during the first workshop, which happened July last year, about 80% of teachers they converted linguistically from the monolingual perspective to the translanguage perspective, having the stance of amplification. So they are eager, they have become creative, creating different strategies, having this stance, strong stance. But the 20%, they were a bit reluctant still. So it was very hard for them to, try out. So stance is the most crucial for this program. Okay, so let me briefly show what happened in Chiang Mai, in Thailand from last May till last week. So this was the collaboration project between Lidi Asia Pacific and Foundation of Applied Linguistics, and funded by the Children's Foundation. Okay, so we had 70 hours of a trainer workshop. I trained 3 trainers in the FAL, Foundation of Applied Linguistics, and then with them we did first in the Translanguaging Education teachers workshop for 4 days. And so if you're interested, I wrote a report here, so you can get the report later on. Okay, so at this time, I focused on the translanguage principle and translanguage classrooms, so that they truly have the translanguage stance and some idea about strategies, and then they applied it by themselves without the concrete kind of idea, concrete kind of hands-on ideas for 1 semester. But during that time, we visited once every month and to coach them. And then after that, we had the MLE, TLE workshop. So 1 day MLE and 2 day TLE workshop for the primary education service area number 5 supervisors and principals. So they got the idea. They really liked the idea. And then we had another. So this is spinning top making. So and then we had another workshop for another area. So in Chiang Mai province, we have 6 areas. So this is the first workshop was done for the area 5. This is area 6. And then we had a second teacher training workshop. So at this time, this is 1+2 days, because first, as you know, there is a lot of turnover of teachers. They got transferred to different schools. So for 1 day, I focused on translating principle for those who are very new to this project. And then the second and third day, I focused on the translanguage strategies, and then equip them to be able to make the translanguage uniplan by themselves during these 4 days. So they are making the uniplan themselves now. And then so this one is for the grade. So this project is done for grade 4 to 6 for the student who graduated MTB-MLE school program from grade 3. And this one is another research project by the supervisor, and she is focusing on the grade 3. Okay, so this was done last week, and then this time the director of FAL, she actually led the workshop, and I prepared all the PowerPoint and those things. So she actually led the workshop very wonderfully. So translanguage idea is very, very easy to transfer to the people, so that they can carry on. Okay, and then we visited the school once every month to to observe their classroom and their strategies and then give feedback and coaching. So these are different checklists, about 17 different translanguaging ideas checklists, so that they can have some ideas they can borrow, they can check, whether they use this activity or not. And then the right-hand side is their meeting log, when do they apply to which one. So, so every month we may have this meeting, and then in between our visit, and every second week, they meet themselves and then they discuss about their experience and learn from each other. Okay, so since all the supervisors from 2 areas, they really agree with this stance, the translanguaging idea. So whenever we visit the school, we have to report their area authority, and they know when we are visiting which school. Okay, so they usually come along with us and then try to support us, and then encourage the teachers to carry on this translanguaging education. So this is strong part of this project. And then this is a checklist for translanguage education classroom observation for supervisors. So when they observe the classroom, when we are not there, so they observe their class and then give feedback to the teacher based on these questions. Okay. And then, so we have a translanguage education research project. So this is about how find a correlation between teachers' stance and their performance level, and then how teachers develop their translanguaging based teaching performance within the course of 1 year. And then longitudinally, after 3 years, we also assess the student performance based on the teachers' teaching. Okay, and then the pros and cons of this TLE pilot project. Strength would be this is in line with the direction towards the multilingualism of the world. So all the world are becoming more and more multilingual. So this translanguaging method, the approach is this really in line with this direction. And this will work for the multilingual students and multilingual classrooms. And this is more sustainable. They use the same curriculum of the government, and then this project has a lot of support from the supervisors. So. So the external, input can be diminished, because it's sustainable, and then it's less expensive. We don't. I try to make this, as cheap as possible, which means less expensive means, we don't need local teachers who speak the home language. So teachers, the government school teachers who speak the Thai or the government official language can do this without hiring. Usually it costs a lot to hire local teachers, right? And then this is a good match with MLE graduate also. So this pilot project, we started from grade 4 among the students who graduated MLE schools. So they had strong foundation in the L1 and then become bilingual. And then we start translanguaging with these bilingual students. And then, then. Any? Do you want to say something or?
It's okay. There was an interference. You can continue, sir.
Okay. And then, so translanguaging never drops their home languages. So because of the government policy or whatever, because of the realistic issue, the MTB-MLE, it's very hard to continue to develop their home language throughout the whole education, right? But the translanguaging, we can seamlessly incorporate their home language, repertoire into the existing curriculum by the discretion of the teachers. So this is, we never drop home languages, okay? And the weak point, if the teacher don't agree with TLE stance, then there's gonna be a problem, okay? So, but so far we had 5 to 6 workshops. So those participants, as I said, there's very strong, positive response from the participants. So I would say, I said before that there was strong conversion, linguistic conversion from the monolingual, rigid perspective to the dynamic bilingualism perspective. Okay. Okay, these are some reports of the first workshop and then the first follow-up visit. And then I summarized So this article is about the Translanguaging top model, which will be published here. But you can click on here and you can download the draft version, not the final version yet. Okay, and then let me briefly go to the different strategies for different factors of the education situation. Okay, okay, so I strongly agree with MTB-MLE for the monolingual students. Okay, and then if we have a teachers support, L1 teachers and volunteers, or we have a material available in L1. So in this case, MTB-MLE works best. Okay, but what if we have a multilingual students? If they are already multilingual, already bilingual, then we can still use the MTB-MLE, but we need to incorporate the translanguage strategies like spinning test strategies, because they are bilingual. They learn better bilingually. They learn better within their bilingual zone of proximal development. For this case, this is not a multilingual classroom, so there is only one kind of student from the same language background, but they are bilingual. In this case, and then they have a teacher support, L1 teacher support, and L1 material. Then there is models developed called paired literacy or biliteracy unit framework, developed by the S. Camilla from the University of Colorado and the others. This is from the America. So you can have a look at this approach for this condition, okay? More bilingual student, but with the support from L1 teachers and L1 materials. And then at the same time, you can incorporate the spinning tower aspect of practice. And here the classroom is not only student about multilingual, but also classroom itself are multilingual. So there are more than one language groups in the same classroom. Then, we have some challenge. I think the most challenge come from this linguistically diverse context in the Philippines also. So in this case, if we have L1 teachers available and L1 materials available, then we may have after school or pull out L1 literacy or multi-grade pull one class for L1 literacy since we have teachers and materials. And then you can apply the bilingual approach with T1 strategies. But in this, since this is starting from KG or grade 1, we start from the oral strategies with initial written strategies. And then this is starting from the grade 3 or 4 among the MLE graduate. Then this is the one that I'm doing in Chiang Mai. So you may imagine the one that I covered today. Okay, so in this case, about the materials, since the Chad asked about the materials, since they have material up to the grade 3, but they don't have further material from grade 4 onwards. So because of to make this program more sustainable as possible, so the material can be made by the student during the lesson. So student can write their stories in L1, and then the model writing can be used for reading material for next year for the same graders. So this way, student can produce those things. But if they have money and they can run the material development workshops, so then we go for it. But if they don't have that, then with limited budget from the government for hiring only teacher at school, only for the existing budget, then this can be sustainable. And then they can also make a bilingual, trilingual key term glossaries from content subjects. So they can elicit, while teacher is teaching the key terms in Thai, but the student can bring their home language key terms so that they can make glossaries of key terms. And then, yeah. And then this one, so this one, without the MLA graduate, but starting from grade 2 or 4. The reason I put the grade 2 or 4 is because by the time they reach grade 2 or 4, they may be able to read and write in their school language in some schools, most schools. So in this case, how to develop their L1 literacy, I would call this is recursive biliteracy. So they learn their L2 literacy first, right? By the time they reach grade 2 and 4. and then they can write in the L1 using the L2 script, the one that you, like the one you saw from the Hmong students in Chiang Mai. And then we need to promote the collaboration with parents and higher graders with the same home language backgrounds. Okay, this is the case when there are no L1 teachers and no L1 materials. Okay, so this is the case, the most challenging situation, multilingual classroom, multilingual students, and starting from KG. So this is the one that I'm actually working on to develop soon, but we can still, since they are multilingual, still we can use the translanguage strategies like a spinning top, but starting with oral because they, a lot of songs and, and then slowly in emergent writing kind of thing. Okay. And then we need to, since they don't have volunteer teachers, we need to seek the L1 material, L1 volunteers. And okay. So I think this is it for now. This is time for any question and answers. Thank you. So let me stop sharing here now.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Sangsok Son. It's amazing that all these ideas on translingualism, MTB-MLE were developed by scholars outside the English-speaking countries and all like that. Williams is from Wales. And then Ofelia Garcia is from Cuba, is Cuban American, and Dr. Sangsok Son is Asian from Korea. So we really need to develop our own approaches, theories that will be fitting to our children. So anyone, you are free to ask questions to clarify terms that we heard for the first time. Dr. Sangsok Son will be helping us even in writing the operations manual. So question. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Sangsok, for the inputs, and we're glad that you gave us examples on how to do translanguaging. In the Philippines we use bridging, and I had that text or research telling that bridging and translanguaging are the same, they mean the same. I don't know. Then, so that's one. But my question really is, have you encountered in your training and even in your classroom observation, or even in dealing with teachers, of variations in terms of language, like one term, in this language have different, or in one language you have several variations of a certain word. And my question is, how do you deal with it?
Okay.
Thank you, Paul.
Okay, so the reason the bridging is understood like a translanguage is because when they implement the bridging strategies in MTB-MLE, it is when their second language is almost reach up to the level of their home language, right? That's why they start talking about the bridging from L1 to L2. So that means they are about bilingual. Okay, so bridging. So I would say bridging is one of the important strategies of translanguaging, which we can utilize from the beginning if the students are bilingual already. Okay, so the translanguaging is meant for the bilingual students, the multilingual students whose home language is non-dominant, but they are becoming bilingual from the beginning, from when they enter the school. Okay, so the principle is the same. So utilizing their home language resources. I didn't use the term mother tongue is because mother tongue is very confusing and very not clear. But the reason we put emphasis on the mother tongue is because with mother tongue, they can learn best when they are allowed to use their mother tongue. When their linguistic repertoire is consists of only mother tongue, then the mother tongue is the one, the whole of their language resources, right? But if their language resources are composed of not only their L1 mother tongue, but also L2, L3, then we have to utilize all of this as a resource. Then only they can truly learn, okay? So the mother tongue, the concept is kind of fixed, kind of rigid. So which is following like a static type perspective. So this is not really fitting in kind of multilingual student. Okay, so bridging, I would say bridging is one of the example of translanguage strategies. About the variations, since we don't utilize the named language of the students as a resource, we don't promote the named language, which might be different from their actual language practice. We try to leverage their actual language practice at home as a resource to learn better, rather than some standardized variety of their home language, which might be not the same as their actual language practice, right? So we try to ask this kind of question: how do you call this in your at home? Okay, then they can show their actual language usage. They're the term they use at their home, which they are all familiar with, right? So we don't ask how do you call this in your standard language. We don't ask like that. Then if you ask like that, then that is not their home language resource anymore. So that is not helpful anymore. Okay. So yeah, go ahead.
Dr. Sangsong, that's why I asked that, because in the Philippine setting, for example, okay, so Bisaya is one language in the Philippines, one of the major languages. So Bisaya is used not only in areas where we predetermine as like as the majority speakers of Bisaya. So it is also used in other areas, even in Mindanao. So now there are variations in the terms. For example, spider, okay, spider. So what we use in the textbook is really the standard of a Bisaya is spoken by a wider community of Bisaya. So we use like for example, we use a certain word like kaka. Okay, so kaka is the term for spider. Now, teachers in Mindanao who are also taught, whose language is also Sinubuano Binisaya, they discovered that when they present the picture, so there are learners, they are all Visayan speakers, but there are learners who say that it's kaka, others say damang. So there are variations. So my stand on that, because like the teachers are really insisting, and even parents are insisting that we need to change the textbook, because the textbook is telling kaka, and kaka is not in their place, it's called damang. So you see, they are insisting. But my stand on that, as the national focal person for mother tongue-based multilingual education in the Philippines, my stand is we use both, or even if we have 5 variations, we use that. Why? Because I always tell them that is additive bilingualism. We are adding the repertoire, like the vocabulary of our learners. And that is an additive bilingualism. Our learners will enrich their vocabulary. So there are instances in the Philippines like that. I am asking you if there are instances in your country such as that if you present a certain picture, because and that students inside the classroom will give you different name, and that refers to, and that is what I mean with variations of that specific term. So how do you deal with, am I doing the right thing of telling that it's additive bilingualism and it will enrich the vocabulary of the learners. Why stick to that? It is something that will help the learners when they go to other barangay, because it's the variation is really peculiar. That if you ride a tricycle, you go to the other barangay, the term will be different into that other barangay, and that will enrich the vocabulary of the learners, that when they visit those places, they will be able to know that, you know, kaka is damang and all those. That's helping them. So that's my stand. I don't know if you have that situation in your country and how you deal with it, and you know, like, in your opinion, am I doing the right thing?
I think that
Barangay, yeah, barangay is village, Dr. Sangsok.
Yeah, village.
okay. So pedagogically, the language variety that the children use in their home domain, in their community, immediate community, is the most important to learn the new concept, to learn the second language, because that's the one they are familiar with. That's the one they know. So we start from what they are familiar with. But as you said, once they have that benefit, then they can also learn different variety if they have to function within the wider community, right? So it's good to have those variation. But the essential part is, you know, we have to start from what they are familiar with. So we try to give more respect for their own variety, for their own kind of, you know, terms. I believe that is helpful for learning the new concept. That's my stance. Yeah.
So in other words, Dr. Sangsok, you know, because there's a move for standardization, right? You have to produce textbook. Dr. Villeneuve is referring to, you know, how we present these ideas in the textbook or in a learning resource material, because when something is written and published, then you are saying this is the standard way of, you know, calling things. But in your perspective, what's important is how children are, what words are familiar to them, how they represent those concepts in oral or written words. That's what you're saying, right?
Yeah. So do you remember the video, the one teacher was asking the group of students, why you came up with a different word list than the other groups? So she asked the question and the student answered, and the teacher, oh, that's why. So in the picture, the video shows that the students own their language practice as their own, and then be proud of their idea, okay? And then teach that idea to the teacher and the rest of the class. So there's no kind of competition between two different ideas or two different tones for the same content, but, you know, they see the variety. So they by acknowledging the variety, they show the respect to the, you know, diversity, right?
Yes,
So
I agree with you. And in fact, that's the reason why even in the materials that we develop, I insisted that they use damang, slash, kaka. That is to cater the different variations of the kids, you know, because that is really acknowledging them, and they mean the same. And I was even telling them that it's the same as the English language. You say beautiful, is pretty, they are synonyms. You know, my stand is really to go to that rather than, you know, sticking to what we say standards, because if we really would like our learners to learn, we really need to start from what they know, even in terms of language. If that they recognize this as kaka, then so be it. If others recognize this as damang, then so be it. But, you know, like, if we cater to one and we develop another materials for those who are using kaka, that's very impossible, because we have limited source, or we have limited funds. So my solution is to have that word, then slash. So if you can see in the books that we are producing nationwide, so you can see 3 to 4 variations, and I accept that because those books will really go all over the country with those different people supposedly speaking the same language, but with variations on those different terminologies. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
There are other questions from
Hi, Ma'am Jed.
Sir Luis. Sir
Yes,
Luis.
yes. Hi, Dr. Sangsok. In what specific grade level translanguaging should be utilized? Kasi 'di ba, since different speaker has a unique language repertoire, kasi in the Philippines, we have kindergarten for mother tongue and then we transfer for grade 1. So do you have any recommendation which particular grade level translanguaging should be utilized?
In theory, we need to start the translanguaging from the beginning, from KG. But in practice, it is very challenging. I mean, it is very challenging to start from that early level if the classrooms are multilingual. Okay, and then if we don't have support from the L1 teacher or L1 material, I think this is very common in all over the world. Okay, so but the main principle is that the translanguage education is utilizing students all of their language resources. So when they enter the KG, they are more bilingual, right? They are more home language. They are more monolingual. They speak only their home language variety when they enter the KG. But when they then utilizing their home language as a resource. This is translanguaging, okay? But when they become more bilingual, learn the Tagalog or second language, school language more and more, they are becoming more emergent bilingual and then expanding, you know. So according to their actual language competence, actual language performance level, we utilize that, the real language practice as a resource, you know, dynamically, flexibly, not fixed like a, for certain year you use only one language, for certain year only another, not like that. This is seamlessly incorporate, you know. So depending on their actual language proficiency, okay. But so in this case, for that case, if the classroom is monolingual, and then students are coming from the same language background, then the MTB-MLE is actually translanguaging education, right? Because the MTB mother tongue, this mother tongue means all of their language resources, right? From the KG, because they are using only mother tongue as their home language, right? But when they are becoming more bilingual, and if there is more than one language groups, then implementing MTB-MLE is very challenging. We have to hire L1 teacher from different language groups, so this becomes unrealistic. That's why we need some other alternative, you know, ideas, which I promoted. Translanguaging is better fit in this kind of multilingual classrooms, and the students are becoming multilingual, bilingual. So in theory, it's better. It's always better from the beginning. So we may start from the beginning, like KG, from oral translanguaging strategy, because they don't know how to read and write yet. But we are focusing on oral translanguaging strategies, and then slowly, you know, we introduce the writing as they learn the L2 first from the school, and then but it's easier. It's very easy to do that from grade 4 or grade 3. Once they become literate in L2, then it's very easy to do the translanguaging, because by that time they learn L2 already, and then L1 is also growing. L1 is also there. So then we can try like they learn how to read and write in L2 first, and then we utilize the L2 idea, L2 writing script for their writing in their L1. So that way we can do their biliteracy kind of program. But until they reach until they know how to read and write in their L2, the school language, like a grade 1 or a KG, then we may do a more oral translanguaging approach, I think.
Thank you so much, Doc.
Yeah.
So, sir, so for early grades, KG, it's kindergarten, and grade 1, it's oral translanguaging. But at the same time, we can also do the pairing and groupings that you introduce. And also the teacher can learn from the students. Those are the basic practices.
Yeah.
So I think the translanguaging is very ideal as the students get older, like from grade 3 and then to maybe high school, because in our law, the mother tongue or the regional languages should be auxiliary languages. So as they, you know, get older, we will not be abandoning the mother tongue, but we will be using all languages so that they will develop their conceptual understanding in content areas. So that's because I also noticed with Ofelia Garcia, she's using translanguaging with older students more than younger ones.
Yeah. So the younger, the more challenging, but I think, but we have to try it for younger students also. Yeah.
Yes, sir. We will document our lesson. Okay.
And then, Ma'am Ched, translanguaging, of course, is not just code switching the language. Kasi Dr. Son presented to us a model, a right model, how to use the translanguaging, benchmarking with what they did in Thailand, no? So this is not just a code switching of different languages, right? How did Doc Sangsok, how did translanguaging differ from the code switching?
Yeah.
Okay.
Especially you mentioned oral translanguaging. So how is it different?
So translanguaging has different paradigm than the code switching. Code switching, you know, as soon as you talk about code switch, okay, that means you presuppose language has a different boundary, language has different entity. So that's why you switch from one language to the other language. And then code switching, but on the other hand, the translanguaging is without really concern about language boundaries, using all of their language resources, whether there is a monolingual, one language or several languages, using all of their language resources freely, if the context allows. If context does not allow, they can flexibly, strategically use the certain feature which is appropriate for the communication context. So translanguaging includes code switching in practice when they use two languages together. But cross-language also means using one language. Okay, like in this case, I have to use only one language, right? But I'm translanguaging because I'm using all of my language resources in my brain. But my output in this time is only English. So I'm translanguage. I'm using all of my language resources anyway. But on the surface level, you hear only English. But in this case, you don't call me, my practice now is code switching, right? But this is also translanguaging. So translanguage includes code switching as part of their language practices. Yeah.
So language is not a bounded entity. So from the translanguaging perspective, the post-structuralist, it's not Hindi, Thai, Tagalog, but these are like, they are fluid, as you mentioned in your talk.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. So in other words, because sometimes we penalize or we tell students, oh, don't speak, you're not allowed to speak this language, speak English only or Tagalog only. So you're saying in a translanguaging perspective, you don't prohibit, but you allow children to use any language.
So if that is appropriate, strategically,
Okay.
not really randomly, then other students who don't understand their home language, then they may feel isolated, right? So teacher needs to be very strategic. Teacher needs to plan their lesson for when do they use which languages or when do they allow to use all of their language resources. So usually we group the student according to the common home language background. Like we group in subgroups so that within their group, they share their language repertoire together, right? Their home language and the school language together. Then they are more freely use all of their language resources, like a spinning top very fast. But when they present before the whole class, who are speaking different languages, then they may have to use a common language like lingua franca in the Thailand or in the Philippines, or so the school language. So that translanguaging is using the student repertoire strategically, freely as much as possible, but strategically and appropriately to the extent that the communication flow, to the extent to make meaning.
Okay, sir, there's a question here from Marites Piñera. What is the difference of translanguaging compared to the grammar translation method in language teaching?
So can you define the grammar translation method?
Ma'am Marites, can you please define what do you mean by grammar translation method in language teaching? Ma'am Marites, maybe, saan ba siya?
I'm not quite sure whether grammar translation method is utilized for the multilingual students. I think this is meant for, this is grammar translation. So this is more like a automatic translation, isn't it, from language. So they read one English text and then they write the translation in their home language, right? So always line by line, and then one by one correspondence, right? But translanguage is not like that mechanic translation, but translanguage is very dynamic. For sometimes, if there is appropriate, like me, I use only English this time, but with my wife, who share more linguistic repertoire with me, I use Hindi, Thai, Korean, English together. So it's not like a sequential, one language and the other. Even within the sentence, I can use different languages together. Like I understand the Filipino also use different language even within the sentence, like a main clause for one language and subordinate clause for another language, right? So so this is called intra-sentential code switching. But so code switching is more dynamic than translation after translation, sentence by sentence, if they understand the grammar translation right.
Yeah. Sir, here's sister's explanation. Maybe she cannot talk due to connection. She meant by what she meant by grammar translation method is using the native tongue or the mother tongue to explain the grammar structure of a second language. It's like comparing L1 and L2 language structure.
I think this is one strategy, one of the strategies in TLE. So since they are learning the content, right, the grammar item, one grammatical item in L2 like English, but they cannot explain it. They cannot understand the grammatical term using English because their English is not that much developed yet. Then they have to be allowed to use their home language to explain that, right? So this is one of the translanguaging method, strategies. Yeah, thank you.
Is it the same as developing metalinguistic competence
by
or awareness?
comparing the development metalinguistic awareness too, right? So as soon as they have written two languages line by one, then they automatically see the difference, and then by line by one, teacher can notice what kind of language transfer, what kind of mistake they student make based on their language transfer from their home language. So this is not like an error, but kind of some point which can be used as a stepping stone for planning further lesson, because they have this confusion because of the L1. So the teacher can teach this confusing item for next lesson, something like that.
Okay, any more questions? Sir, no one is asking yet. We have an issue lately because of our poor performance in TIMSS and PISA, and these exams were taken in English because the English is used for grade 8 students who took the test, and for grade 4 students who took the test for TIMSS. So there's a study which says that it's hard to assess the skills, knowledge of children. It's hard to assess the multilingual competence of children. They cannot demonstrate what they know in one language only. Therefore, they tend to underperform in monolingual exams, tests like PISA. And so what can you say about this?
As I said, the reason the static type practice is unfair in our education is because the bilingual student cannot show their true knowledge, true skill using only one language, right? Because they are bilingual, they can show their true knowledge when they are allowed to use all of their language resources, right? But you are saying that since their knowledge is evaluated only in English, right, which is very limited language for the student. So this is not fair. So within this structure, the government cannot truly assess their true knowledge, true skill. So this is So test meant for the evaluating their true skill, true knowledge, right? Then that test system is the good testing system. So I would say this is not good testing system. So they have to incorporate like a different angles, like from the student themselves, from the parents' perspective. Like for instance, in an international school where my youngest son attends in Chiang Mai here, they evaluate all his performance in English only. But sometimes in certain subject, he cannot show the true knowledge using only English. So, but my evaluation for his performance is a bit higher than teachers in the evaluation. So teacher needs to hear from parents kind of feedback, so that teacher can incorporate teachers and parents kind of evaluation, so that if teacher evaluate my son like a 4 out of 5, then I evaluate a 5, then teacher may do it, make it like a 4.5, something like that. So teacher so how to make our testing system in a multilingual way is very challenging from the government perspective. We have to standardize all testing, but in reality, in practice, in the classroom setting, teacher is the one who can do it, within her or his kind of authority or discretion, right? So teacher is very important, within the one language only language policy imposed in each school, but teacher can utilize, can leverage student home language without being noticed by outsiders. So teacher is very important. So teacher's strong stance for the student home language and bilingual is crucial to make this sound education happens.
Thank you, sir. So here, our linguist here is saying that it is unfair to judge our students based on a monolingual test like TIMSS and PISA. So because it's causing a lot of discomfort, and they are blaming the teachers. They want to change everything because of these results from TIMSS and PISA. So that's very comforting to know that it's really the monolingual tests in English is not enough to measure what they really know. Okay, sir, there's a question here. Is it all right for the teacher to translanguage or code switch in her okay, it's the teacher herself code switching in the medium of instruction in a learning area? Like if she's teaching science, she can use several languages. Is it okay for the teacher? Because you said that it's okay for the student. How about for the teacher?
I think so. I think so, to the extent that so teacher needs to know where our students are in terms of the translanguage performance top, right? So where they are and then teacher. So like for instance, even if for the content teaching, teacher, if students don't understand their school language in instruction about the content, then teacher should use the language the student understand to explain the concept, right? Otherwise, how can education happen? How can learning happen? But even during the TPR, for instance, like a language learning lesson, TPR meant for only one language usage policy, right? So for instance, English, so even if within the TPR kind of unit plan, TPR kind of lesson plan, teacher is supposed to use only one language. But even if within that session, if there is an unclear kind of moment happen, for instance, go and walk, it's very confusing. The teacher show walking, but this can be interpreted like by the student, like either walking or going, right? So if there is some kind of confusing moment, then teacher can tell this is walk, not the go. Okay, in the language the student know, then instantly their confusion, the confusion disappear, and the student follow the instruction. So there are some moments that some clarity needs to be something needs to be clarified by using their student home languages. If we don't use that, then the confusion continues, and then students become very confused. So teacher needs to know the students' kind of translanguage current when they are teaching either content or language. If they are really puzzled, then teacher needs to shift, even if they plan their lesson, unit plan, they design, but they need to shift. This is one of the three strengths. Shift so that become flexible by leveraging their students, common familiar languages.
Thank you. Because it's interesting that in your video, the Thai teacher speaks Thai, but she accommodates input in Hmong and Karen. But and then even in Ofelia Garcia's writings, the teacher speaks English only, but she accommodates responses from Japanese, Russian. But in our case in the Philippines, the teachers are also multilingual.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Unlike in those articles, it's just the students who are multilingual. But here, usually the teachers, they speak the same number of languages that the students speak. So there's an advantage here.
But in the Philippines, I guess that even if the teachers are multilinguals, but teachers usually don't know all the languages spoken by the student, right? Maybe either one or two.
Yeah. So not all.
With multiple linguistically diverse context in the classroom, teacher does not know all the languages. So in
yes,
that
sir.
Case, yeah, the Ofelia Garcia or this TLE ideal can be applied, I think.
So you're saying that even if the teacher doesn't know the language, she can still learn. She does not prohibit the student from using his language, and she can learn.
Right. Yeah. Right.
But it's difficult for kindergarten because you can expect the kindergarten student teaching the teacher how to say things in his language because it's not yet so confident.
Kindergarten and grade 1, we need to have a lot more collaboration from the parents or the community who knows the language, and then the students' level of the conversation itself is not that much developed yet, right? So we may more incorporate the songs and other type mode rather than just oral.
The spoken. Okay. So here's a question here. Is it okay for the teacher to code switch or translanguage during classroom observation? Because what they do in the Philippines, like if you are a science teacher and science should be taught in English, and there's a supervisor observing you or the school head principal observing you, then you should use only English. But Sir Lemuel is asking, can the teacher code switch if she's teaching?
Okay, so again, this is code switching. How much they use code switch? This is important thing. So some teachers, they code switch very mechanically, English, Tagalog, English, Tagalog. So if there is the predictable way, then the student doesn't want to listen the more challenging language, but they wait until they hear the easy language, right? So there is no chance to learn the school language. So if there is a predictable way, this is not good. And then again, teacher needs to be aware, needs to be sensitive, the translanguaging current of the student, how much they can understand English. Then to the extent they can understand English, then teacher needs to talk in English only. But if student feel puzzled, then teacher may switch to the language the student know in a strategic way. Okay, not like automatic mechanic way. Yeah.
That's good, because it's interesting because the student will not listen to the English and just wait when it is okay. I'm glad that you emphasize that.
I add, Ma'am Ched, and I think Dr. Sangsok really had a point in that, and that is why we really discourage transfer of translanguaging, or even we only request our teachers to do that when the needs arises, because we should remember our goal. Our goal is for the students to be able to understand the concept and be able to apply it. So if, like in instances wherein students cannot really cope with the teaching and learning process and the way you explain the lesson, then that's the time. But there is no requirement, or there is no specific time. We don't really allow our teachers to always do that, because you're right that the students who are lazy to develop the skills in the target language will just dependent and waiting for that. See that even the reason why bilingual books, you know, like books that have two languages there, we encourage, you know, we use that, but we really don't require or don't prescribe, because the students will be dependent on the wait time for, if they have this translated story, then they'll just read the translated without focusing on the target language, and that's a negative. It will develop a negative attitude to the students and even to the system, whose aim is to develop the child's, you know, acquisition of the second language or the target language in that. Thank you for pointing that out, Dr. Sangsok.
Oh, Rose, let me add one more concern about, based on what you said. So translanguaging is good for scaffolding, to learn the concept, okay, to learn the second language. But this doesn't stop there, okay? Translanguaging promote the transformation of who they are, and then for them to become critical and creative, and then so ultimately we want to develop all of their language resources, expanded, you know, not only L2 only, okay, not only learning the concept. For that reason, I introduced the threshold theory, okay. Yeah. So mostly translanguaging is helping them to understand the concept as a scaffolding, but at the same time, maybe by spending some time, not all of time, but some time to elicit to process those concepts in their home language, and then verbalize and then write it down their home language in a written form. That way they can develop their home language not only, you know, basic level like a basic everyday life proficiency, but also cultural level, academic, you know, language, in not only school language but also their home language, so that they can develop two languages together. Then only they have a positive cognitive effect, right? Then only they can perform better than the majority dominant speaking monolingual students. So we don't promote the automatic mechanical translation, but we need to have a strategic way of, you know, utilizing home language as a resource for the sake of scaffolding, as well as also for developing their home languages along with their school language, so that they can have a cognitive, you know, positive cognitive effect ultimately. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So it should be planned and strategized. It's not the automatic translation. Yeah, okay. And then another thing that you said is the importance of biliteracy or multiliteracy. So it's not some translanguaging is not just to develop in the target language, you know, to be skillful in English, but at the end you will be literate both in English and in your mother tongue and in Filipino. That's what you're saying. It's multiliteracy, not the subtractive. Okay, and there's another question from Sir Ricky Pedralba from the Surigao group. Most teachers often find it disturbing teaching MTB-MLE subject if her pupils have multiple languages. There were those speaking English as language one, others are Sinagbuanon Bisaya, others Tagalog or Filipino, and still others Ilonggo, although the rest are Surigao-non. Others, there are other languages popping in the classroom, okay? It is understood that if the majority are Surigao-non, so Surigao-non will be served. So Surigao-non here is the lingua franca. To the detriment of those who don't speak it or are not yet proficient. Is the teacher fair when the focus is only with Surigao-non learning material? So he's talking about learning materials.
So for this case, I would recommend that you know, since this which language Surigao-non is used as a medium of instruction and the lingua franca in the area, right? But there are students whose home language is different from this lingua franca. So so I think this is not fair, as I said from the graph, like this is slope playing field. Okay, so in this case, teacher needs to develop different translanguaging, like a spinning top ideas, speaking the strategies through which the student who speak not this language, to be able to use their home language as a resource to learn the content. And if possible, group the student who speak the same minority languages so that they can work on even writing, not only understanding the concept, so that other students also can have a chance to use all of their language resources besides this Surigao students.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions? I was also fascinated when I saw an essay in a translanguaging class. The essay was first, that child was thinking aloud in his language. So the first version of the essay was written in, maybe a mix of languages. And then the latter part is English, because in the US, translanguaging is used in teaching English. It's, in some places, not all places. So it's because in the Philippines, when you tell a child, write an essay, then you expect the final product in English. But in this particular material, the child wrote that in his language or languages and then came up with the final essay later on.
So I think the final product usually come up with one language, but that is not the only option, right? So if the students are bilingual, and then if the audience of their writing, the story is the bilingual audience, like their parents or their community members, then if student can combine two languages in the writing even, then the community will understand the better, and then the writing itself become more authentic, more realistic. So if that is the condition, then we can also promote the bilingual writing. If the writing ultimate writing audience is academic, like if we write the academic paper, then we have to use only English, right? But this is so hard for me to write the English only because I cannot really show, right? So to the extent, it is appropriate, we encourage the student to write using the oral language resources so that they can truly show their true knowledge, true idea, and then the text become very rich and authentic. Yeah.
Although there are some schools in Europe, those who are adhering to plurilingualism, that are allowing students to express themselves in various languages in one essay. So it's quite radical, because in the Philippines you say you just use Filipino or English or mother tongue. You stick to one language. But in those particular models in Europe, they are allowing the students to express themselves to express the writing, to write in any language, mix of languages.
I think, Ma'am Ched, that those are the things that like educators in the Philippines should think about, because we should understand that our learners have different proficiency level in those languages, so that their ability to write will really be dependent on their proficiency levels of that language, so that they'll be able to relate their cognitive domains, their thinking into the writing, which is very, very relatable, like they really have to be consistent. So, and that is why that's the reason why we go for mother tongue based multilingual education, because we consider the cognitive development and even the reasoning skills of the learners, be it oral or in written. So that's really the challenge. That's really what we gonna have to convince the rest of the educators, that before we think of asking our learners to get at themes in English, knowing that we only introduce English in grade 1 for third quarter with just the oral language, and our learners have limited access to English speaking people and even media. So I think we should be able to convince them and look deeper into the proficiency of the learners in that language before we ask them to do or write in those languages. And the worst is to take the test in those languages. You know, but it takes really a courage and a strong pool of people to be able to convince that maybe linguists or many linguists would tell that, because we all know that education and language is a political issue. I don't know in your country, Dr. Sangsok, but you know, like in the Philippines, I think we need to struggle with education and politics.
Yeah, you better speak in to our senators. So,
I
Doctor,
not if they listen to us. I was even telling the group during the time of Secretary Lapus, the senators and the congressmen are, you know, better and considerate because before they do something or react on something, they will invite a resource person and ask that resource person to talk in an hour, so that they'll have a better understanding, and then they ask and depend. But now the setting is different. You will just be asked to talk for 10 minutes with people who does not understand, you know, like it's really different now compared to, that's why I was able to defend squarely the inclusion of mother tongue in the K to 12, because I was given lots and lots of time in the Congress and in the Senate to explain what mother tongue is. But now, you know, I could not even speak if I am not called. You see, it's different now.
so is it possible, like the community of linguists, your group, and maybe the ones in India?
Yeah, I think now more than ever, we need people from outside, you know, like distinguished linguists and practitioners to really help us, because you know, like now more than ever, I saw that I am, you know, like I am less empowered than before. Like, you know, I can just speak out before, even with senators and Congress, but it's different now.
So, Dr. Sangsok, in Korea, English is the second language, right? It's an added language that's being taught in school.
Which
among
one?
in Korea, among the in Korean school.
Uh-huh.
Is it right that in Korea you you also teach English to your children, right?
In Korea, the medium language is already Korean from KG to university.
But you also teach English, right?
To my own students.
I mean, in Korea, there's a subject in you teach English
subject.
as a second language.
English is taught as a subject from the beginning. Yeah.
I see. So let me ask, because one issue that we have in MTB-MLE is finding the academic register, the intellectualized, we call it intellectualized language, like, you know, terms for photosynthesis and those terms. How did you do it in Korea? Because even Filipino, we don't have terms for more complex scientific terms, you know? But in Korea, in other countries that use their local language in teaching physics, agriculture, and, you know, science, how did you develop your language so that it can develop its own register for academic terms?
I left Korea about 2 decades ago, so I don't know about it. But as far as I know, like the term that I know in English is developed in Korean language also, which is very foreign to me. So the academic terms for me, since I learned in the tertiary education through the English in the textbook and medium. So those academic terms for me, you know, more familiar, English more familiar, but when they are educated in Korea, then they learn the academic term in Korea. So Korea is very much developed up to the academic level, but it depending on where they are educated, they know which language better. But for the sake of But if you compare the North Korean language, I have the same Korean, but North Korea have the policy of not using the foreign words, any borrowing words. So they have developed the language the best in the world, I believe. They use only pure Korean. They do no borrowing, no English. They don't use even computer. They have term for the computer. They have term for the TV. So
Okay.
they are purely monolingual kind of country.
Ah, okay. That's happening in North. So they have a program to develop terms in using Korean
I guess so.
terms.
I guess they have some kind of institute to develop the Korean language, I think. Yeah. In
It's
South
just,
Korea also, they have a very conservative institute who continue to develop the Korean language. Yeah.
so there's an institute. How about in Thailand, sir? How do they develop their language so that it's used even in PhD and graduate school?
I'm not aware of any institute for that development, but as far as I hear, and so the first so for up to the MA and PhD, I think they do the PhD writing in Thai. So that means they have that much development, but I'm not quite sure about the term. The key term might be in English, but the Thai has the very strong kind of Thai standardized process, and they have a strong policy to promote the Central Thai. So Thai is less multilingual than Philippines or India or Singapore. Thai is more like a Thai dominant kind of country, as much as Korean, I think.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? I keep on asking questions because no one is asking, but maybe those who are here, feel free to ask question. The reason that I'm asking question is because everybody's quiet, but please feel free to ask question. Another question is, you mentioned that you gave a 40 hours of training for translanguaging. Is it right? 40 hours or 3 days of training for
Yeah.
TLE.
Mhm.
What kind of, you talk for 2 hours or less. So how do you expand TLEs and into a 3-day or
Okay, so
expanded? What
during
are the
the
subtopics?
that's good. Thank you for asking that because no one asked about the workshops. So there were, the translanguaging, the concept. This is new paradigm, new approach. This is so difficult to make them understand, right? So my wife and I tried to make this as easy as possible, as simple as possible, and then we designed many activities through which they can process the idea. So there are a lot of activities, concept activities. So please read the workshop report that I share for the first workshop. You can see what kind of topics are covered for about 14 sessions, I think. And then this is, so from the immediate last week workshop, the director of the FAL, she actually led the workshop with using the PPT that I made. And then this is very transferable. I was so shocked or impressed, to see how this is so easily transferred to the others once they got the idea and then utilize the similar content. And this is so easy to be transferred. So somehow I feel kind of emptiness, but somehow I feel kind of very impressed. But meanwhile, for the principle, those things are easy to transfer, but the strategy part is still need to be developed, like for the lower grades, which I am working on now. Yeah.
So is the training provided by, is it organized by Lead Asia, SIL Lead Asia?
Yeah, so Lead Asia, SIL has the intellectual kind of ownership, but it is shared with a local organization called FAL, and then you can share it further down.
I see. So we can attend your future training your training in the future, because our national trainers on MTB-MLE attended a one-month training at Chiang Mai with Susan and Dennis Malone. So that's how we started. So since you are part of SIL and you are aware of the training curriculum of SIL in MTB-MLE, specifically that's promoted by the Malones, Susan and Dennis Malone, and here Deckers were our source of information, and others in MTB-MLE community. Because translanguaging, you said, is something new. So how would you comment? How can we improve on the ideas introduced by the Malones, by the stringer, the strategy method, and other things, TPR. How can we improve that as we write our operations manual?
So by the way, the Dennis Malone was my former mentor, and then Diane Decker is my supervisor anyway.
Mhm.
So MTB-MLE, I would say the term MTB-MLE is, very, I would say, very exclusive for it designates only one specific condition of the context, like monolingual students, homogeneous classroom, with enough fund to hire local teachers and produce the material. If that is okay, then MTB-MLE work the best. But all the world becoming more multilingual, there are more chance of multilingual classrooms, and the government don't want to spend money for hiring the local teacher continuously more than 4 to 5 years. And those things are the reality. And then the SIL has been asked by our partner organization for the last 15 years, then what about multilingual classroom? How do you do it? So we had no answer from the MTB-MLE perspective to meet, to feed, those contexts. So that's how we ended up developing this new paradigm, new approach for aiming for the multilingual classroom with multilingual students, bilingual students, so that we can serve those contexts better. So that we can have at least two options: MTB-MLE for the homogeneous classroom and translanguage education for multilingual classroom. So MLE, TLE is a rhyme, right? It's brother and sister.
TLE and
Don't
MLE.
compete, but we help each other. We complement each other. Yeah.
That's great.
But the paradigm is different, actually. The MTB-MLE presupposes that we separate language, like one language first, mother tongue first, and then after certain years, we through the bridge, we switch to second language, right? But translanguage is, from the beginning, we are doing together. So the way we look at the language is MTB-MLE is more like a static type perspective. Translanguage is more like a spirit type perspective.
Yeah, but we can use both, as you said.
Yeah,
We can use
yeah.
both. We
So
are
as
not
you saw,
discarding.
during the supervisor's workshop, we had 1 day MLE, 2 day TLE. So we did it together. So the supervisor had idea of both MLE and TLE together, so that they can supervise the teachers and principals. Yeah.
Okay, great. Sir, there's a question here. May I ask how many languages do they have in Thailand? How many languages are considered mother tongue language, and how many other languages?
I think I guess around 78 languages in Thailand, and then the term mother tongue is not. I think this is special term which is used in the Philippines, right? So I don't know how you define the mother tongue, but different countries define mother tongue differently. India define mother tongue differently. So in order to become the mother tongue, they have to meet a certain criteria. So I don't know about the mother tongue, the concept, but as far as I know, there are around more than 70 different languages used in Thailand, and then most minority languages are used on the mountain area, whose speakers are coming from the neighboring countries like China and Myanmar and Laos. And originally they were refugees, but they got their legal status nowadays, so they are recognized by the government. Yeah.
So it's 70. So many. I thought there are only few. I mean, I thought it's just Thai and then few, but 70. That's a lot. Okay. Another comment here. I agree because their experience is only with minority language against national language, not with multilingual settings. This is Ma'am Rose. She's commenting. And then Ma'am Cecil from UNICEF. Earlier, the factor of socio-emotional development of children was seen as having an effect on performance and growth of children, especially you mentioned about if their language is not the dominant one. For translanguaging to work, I imagine it will be important for students to have the courage to step up and declare that they're having difficulty in understanding certain concepts. Given the stigma or students thinking others might think negatively of them if they do declare difficulty in understanding. Of course, parents' stance will help remove this kind of hesitation from this among children. Has this figured clearly in your discussion?
This figured.
Or in translanguaging, like if a child comes from a minority group and
I think
struggling
so.
to express himself?
Through this translanguaging strategy process, like a teacher start acknowledging the language variety that the language resource that student brings from home to school, and it is heard. Those languages are heard in the classroom officially, formally, and it is written on the blackboard, whiteboard. So through this process, students feel like a high self-esteem. Like one day when my wife and I taught English, but asked them to speak up the same term in the home language, language by language, okay? So the group of students from one language, they said one thing. And so by hearing those, by saying out, by speaking up their language in the classroom, they are becoming more used to, our language are recognized and acknowledged. And then the other students who speak different language, they also have a chance to hear, formerly unheard language, and formerly unwritten language, and they hear and they see the difference. And so, and the teacher also themselves, take the position of the co-learner, so that then the student may feel much more, self-esteem, proud of their heritage. And yeah.
Okay. So, sir, how do the teachers know what languages are represented in her class? Do you do language assessment so that the teachers knows that there are 5 languages represented in the class, or the students have to speak up and assert that, I speak this language, this is how we say it? How do you do that?
For this, our project, since that is very clear, very, very evident, so the groups are, so it from the beginning, it's very clear. Whenever every Friday, they wear their traditional costume and they come to the school. So, so they automatically know which language groups are there. And for the Chiang Mai, the city area where we taught, was more heterogeneous, like 9 languages in the same classroom. So for that case, we have to figure out, we have to ask what kind of language is spoken and how. So I had a questionnaire so that student can answer, and what languages do you use at home, and those kind of questions. So I didn't ask what's your mother tongue, then they may answer only one, even if they are using different languages. So when do you use which languages and where? So those questions, so that that based on that question, a teacher can know, so for which area, which language is used in which domain and when, and together with which language, when do you use 2 languages together, something like that. So in order to capture the real picture, real language practice picture, we have to ask very wide questions. If we ask very monoglossic, monolingual perspective question, then the student can be limited in terms of expressing the real picture. So we have to ask very right question, like what kind of language practices do you have in which domain, and with whom and how often do you mix with other language, something like that, so that we can have the whole picture, both spinning type and static type, and where and when those things. Yeah.
Do you also determine what is their strongest language? Like if they have language repertoire, what is their strongest language? Is there do you ask that? Do you determine what is their strongest
Those
language?
things, I didn't have those things asked, but through the TL activities, when they are participating using their all of their languages, we observe their students practice, okay? Like I show you that some students use L1 first and then translate into Thai. The other students Thai first and then L1 later. And for the grade 7, some students, they are better in Thai, writing Thai, but they are better in speaking their home language. So we asked about that, and why do you think? But because they are not used to writing their home language, that's why they are better in Thai. But actually, their language knowledge in their home language is higher than Thai, even if they are if they learn how to write in home language, right? So I have observed the classroom that students kind of in a response and their actual practice when they gave them choice to choose which language or what, etc. So that by that, we accumulate the information how much they are proficient in which language. So based on that, we make a their top performance top, and then it design the lessons.
Yeah, thank you. So teachers, Dr. Sangsok said that you don't ask what is your mother tongue. That's not the right question, but you should ask what languages do you use at home? What are your home languages, and how do you use them? In what domains, and what are your literacy practices? That's what you said. You observe also their
Yeah.
literacy practices, oral and oracy and literacy. That's what
Uh-huh.
you said, right?
Ma'am Chair, if I may add, we have those questions in our memorandum, DepEd Order 55 on that language mapping.
Mhm.
But I discourage them to ask the kids the question, what language? Because they really don't know. Like the term language is not familiar to them. I ask them to just allow the students to talk and listen and determine what language is that, because who cares about language for especially because we do language mapping for kinder, because that's the first entrance, and so you talk to them. So just what language are you speaking, they don't know like what does language mean. I told them you rather ask them questions and allow them to talk, like, and then you will be able to determine what language is that, because the students, even some parents, does not care about the term language, for as long as they know that that's what they are talking and they don't care whether you call that language. There are even parents who say who interchange like the vernacular, like all these types of languages. So I think, for me, I don't know if you agree with me, but I really don't want to ask what's your language at home. So maybe you ask question, what's your name? Like you ask them to say something so that you will know.
Exactly. That's how I observe the language practice in the classroom. When we group the students according to their common language groups, then they are free to use all of their freely. Then we observe, which language are spoken and which language are written, so that you can observe, correct. Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, because
Especially the language, the concept is very abstractive. So it takes some time until they get the idea of language. So
yeah, it's too difficult.
Yeah.
okay.
Even sometimes would tell, I don't know what language is that, but this is how we speak. They really don't care. Even parents who have not gone to school, they really don't know about language. All they know is they speak that, and that's all.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Sangsok, for sharing your knowledge. I hope that this is not the last time that we will hear from you again, and that you will inform us if you have any training on translanguaging in the future. Ma'am Cheche said here, I think that the tool used by ABC Plus, this is a USAID funded project on literacy, will determine the languages that the child knows and the dominant ones. Uh, there are uh, there are projects here that are into language assessment. So there are qualitative and quantitative ways of determining the language of the child. And based on the study by ACRC, schools, various schools do their language assessment differently. Like some would just write based on ethnicity. So if a child belongs to Waray ethnic group, they would write Waray, even not testing if it's spoken, if the child speaks Waray still. Others would base it based on what that the teacher knows. If the teacher can only speak 3 languages, then she would choose which language would be assigned to the child. Some would be self-reporting. If the child or parents say that they speak this language, then they would put that. In our information system in the Philippines, you're only allowed to write one mother tongue. So maybe the information system should be reviewed so that it will reflect the language or linguistic repertoire of the children. So if as I said earlier, Dr. Sangsok will be helping us in writing the operations manual, and we can interact with him. You can email him if you have questions. And as I said, since he is with SIL Lead Asia, we can learn from them in their future training. So thank you again, Dr. Sangsok, for gracing our workshop for today.
Thank you for attending. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So can I go out?
We're closing. We're having our closing.
Okay.
Our resource person, please. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Sangsok. I hope that this will be the last. That
will not be the last. There will not be. This will not be the last.
Thank you po.
Sir Ma'am Nemia, Sir Luis.
Please switch on your camera.
Yeah, let's have a photo of picture taking. Please turn on your camera so that we can. Yan. Sir Luis, ikaw ba magte-take ng picture? Mas techy ka.
Okay, dalawa lang naman yung screen. Yung iba hindi pa naka-open ng videos nila.
Okay, thank you.
Okay na. Thank you. Yeah, okay na tayo, Ma'am Ched. We're done.
We're done. Okay, thank you. So we'll see you at 2 o'clock. Tama ba? 1:30, sorry.
1:30.
Yeah, let's see. We'll see you at 1:30, and we will have a discussion on content and language integration learning. So, Dr. Sangsok, you mentioned about the value of integrating content, so we would like to learn more about that also. Okay, so until then, thank you and see you at 1:30.
Okay. Same link tayo ha, everyone.
Same link. Okay.
Happy lunch.
Thank you po.
Thank
you po.
Thank you.
Happy lunch.
Thank you po.